Well, hello everybody. Welcome to tonight's webinar, and I look forward to speaking with you all. My name's Captain Dave Chieffo, and my partner there in the picture is Captain John Luchka. We run long-run fishing charters. We're out of Point Pleasant, New Jersey. We do numerous seminars through the year at all the boat shows and stuff, and privileged certainly with some great sponsors, including Navionics here tonight. So definitely want to give a thanks to Navionics, and we're going to highlight a bunch of things that we do using Navionics. I think you'll find very informative. We run a 30-foot center console. Once again, I'm out of Point Pleasant, so we're fishing the Jersey coast and running all the way up into New York and Rhode Island waters there, and back down, running south down to Atlantic City and even Delaware at some points. So if you're ever in the area and you'd like to get on board, we'd love to have you with us. Well, let's see. Let's get rolling. Let's get you excited. Okay, there we go. A little teaser reel, kind of get you started, get me in the mood too. I'm looking forward to getting back out there. Anyway, I want to talk to you about fishing strategies, what we kind of employ, for our charter clients and for ourselves, because we love to fish. So we're out there too sometimes if there's not a trip scheduled and we know there's a bite going on or there's new fish that just came in the local area, we want to get on them. So tonight I'm going to cover a bunch of different things. I have a lot to cover with you, so if you guys would like to stay patient with me, and we could do a lot of Q&A at the end if that works. Okay. One of the things we're going to talk about is is the AIS. We're going to be using that to locate a possible bite if we hadn't had any intel in a while, and there's a lot of hush hush and nothing's going on, no one's talking. AIS is certainly one of the ways we're going to try and find out and discover what's going on. The other thing is, well, we're going to highlight some areas of the echo sounder. We're going to look at a bunch of different things that we do at Long Run when we're searching for bait and we're searching for fish. So we're going to share our techniques with you. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to show you how we develop emerging patterns with our chart plotter, which will give you some insight to what we do and how we go about finding fish and things of that nature. The other one is we're going to touch just a little bit on the autopilot, how we use it, how it works well for us on the troll for inshore species. We're going to be talking a lot about striped bass tonight as the fall run is going to be coming upon us, so we're kind of juiced about that. The other thing I want to talk to you is we'll get into sonar. I want to talk a little bit about chirp, its origination, its difference to pulse technology over the pinging of traditional sonar. Also want to get into some side imaging with you, some of the overlay features and things that we do with side imaging and down scan. And also radar. Radar is a big one. Radar really helps us put us in the area, once again, with little intel, little knowledge of what's going out there, especially on a long weather with the passing hurricanes that have come in and things of that nature. No one's been out on the water. And so the first guys that are out there, kind of puzzling things out, it's nice to jump in that as well. And lastly, just wrapping it up in a log, and an e-log is great. You can keep your e-logs any way you want. You can, sometimes I'll just use the notes on my iPhone, just to log the conditions of the day, what was going on, and just put that away for safekeeping when I want to understand, season to season or years down the road, what the migration routes were for striped bass, and go back in those notes. And believe me, there's always one or two things I can pull out of there that's, going to really help me in the upcoming fall run. All right, so one of the things I want to show you, and you'll see me there in the picture with the Navionics, is it's important to let you know we fine tune our electronics throughout the day. It's got to compensate, for all the ever-changing conditions that are going on out there. And in order to get on that next bite, we better be fine tuning, we better be looking at different things and popping in waypoints and so on and so forth. So let's get a little further into this. here we go with a little AIS information. AIS is a huge advantage, especially if you don't know what's going on out there and you don't have a satellite phone, for instance. You know you have a few buddies out there and you want to get in touch with them, but of course you don't want to key the mic on the VHF and everybody's going to know what's going on, even with certain codes, you know, up one, down one, you know, 13 plus 2, so on and so forth. So everybody's got their little tricks when they're communicating. One of the things you can do with the AIS is once you have your MMSI number, you'll be able to have access to this system, especially on the DSC as well. Just to give you a little overview, I'm just going to grab my little pointer here and kind of highlight a couple of things. You'll see the name list here, okay? The name list here is in these vectors, so you'll kind of see them, you know, the boats are in here, they're here, they're here. And it gives you an idea in your bearing range. Right now, this one here is particularly set up at a quarter mile, and eighth of a mile, and it'll give you there's 14 boats currently in that list. So, you know, a couple of friends may be out there, or even a couple of head boats that we know that are really good, you know, good captains, you know, they're on the fish. We can get an idea. So right off the gate, we kind of have an idea going, hey, so-and-so's over here. Let's make a run. Let's see if they're on fish and go from there. But let me break it down with the AIS details, okay? If you look down, right, with the MMSI number, here it is, their call sign. It'll tell you the type of boat it is. Actually, this one here is a tanker, so it's not really a fishing vessel, anything that we're interested in. But it gives you some really good information. It'll give you the length of the vessel. It'll give you the beam of the vessel. And then you're going to get its bearing. You're going to get its distance from us and some other information. I'm going to flip over to the right side of the screen. It's actually going to give us things that are really important. I want to know the lat and longitude. I want to be able to look at that lat and longitude, throw that plot up, throw a waypoint on it, take a look at the structures, see where they are, what depth they're fishing, you know, what's going on, you know, and that's really, really important information for me. So those are a few things that I'm looking at, and John as well, we're looking at before we make a decision going, hey, we had a plan before we left the dock, but now all of a sudden so-and-so's out there. I think something's going on. Let's go make a run. All right, so a couple details that we're going to get, the kind of information you're going to get out of this. Is it a party boat engaged in fishing? Is it a six-pack fishing charter, for instance? Are there friends? Are there friends that we know that are good fishermen or good captains that are out there, you know, that could definitely help us get in on a bite and jump in on that action? The other thing that's really important, and I highlighted it before on the other side, was exact position. We're going to be right where they are. We're going to know what they're doing. We're going to know if they're on the troll. We're going to know where they sat in, you know, where they jumped in on the troll, what direction they were trolling in, because you're going to get that vector information. So you're going to have their past information. You're going to have their current heading line. You're going to have their turning point. There's just a lot of information there. Getting back, and I know I'm kind of jumping all over, so forgive me, get a little excited, so I'll settle in right when we get rolling. But anyway, getting back to the exact position, it's going to tell me a lot. It's going to tell me the type of structure, which might tell me the kind of bottom that they're fishing. You know, if they're going to be fishing for ground fish, or if they're fishing for striped bass or bluefish. You know, if they're in tight to the shore, maybe 12, 15 feet of water, working the bars. You know, I'll know they're basically on bluefish or they're on striped bass, which is something that we'll be targeting for the day. You know, are they on a wreck, drop-offs? The type of bottom. Is it a muddy bottom? Is it a sandy bottom? You know, is it a structured bottom with a lot of rocks and stuff? You know, are there generally rips there and things of that nature? The other thing is important is, are they on the troll? Are they drifting? Are they at anchor? You know, are they on the hook? So all of this is the AIS advantage for getting on a hot bite with very little effort to see what's going on when you leave the dock. All right, let's go a little further. Bear with me one sec. Okay, the other one that I want to talk about is your VHF. Your VHF, if you have it, is equipped with DSC. And DSC is basically a digital selective calling service, hence the acronym DSC. DSC is another way you can communicate silently without everybody knowing when you key that mic, you know, where you're headed, what's going on, who you're talking to, so on and so forth. You can actually program in other members that have, you know, their identity number, which is their MMSI number. And then this way, you can go right in through that system without keying the mic and send them information, maybe your Latin longitude, or to tell them that, hey, I need you to, you know, to call me on channel 65 or 67, you know, and then this way you can communicate back and forth. So it's an inexpensive way to reach other anglers when you're out on the water and have a little bit of communication, especially if you're dialed into a real good bite and, you know, you're a good captain with a good friend network and you want to call those guys in without the rest of the fleet coming after you. Just another great way of reaching out and sharing, you know, the bite information or getting in on bite information, well, you know, when you're leaving the dock. All right, so now I want to get into a little bit of the nitty gritty here. And pretty much we're going to talk about a lot of overlaying that we do. And overlaying is really key. It's a very important part of our success and how productive we are on the water. So to give you an idea, and sometimes I'll read off of these slides, but we overlay our sonar chart live. I'm going to grab my little pointer here. And we're going to do a little notation. If you take a look here, our SIMRAD, this one here, we're running the NSS 16 Evo 2, and we're basically overlaying the sonar chart live right on our chart. Now, if you come over to the chart, and you'll see it's very faint because my transparency is very light, but you'll notice it's kind of a pinkish color. And that basically will tell you, that bearing ring will tell you that's what we're recording live. That's the area that we're recording. And you can select any transparency level you want and shade the coverages areas. You can change the coverage areas. You have a lot of range of change and, you know, and to manipulate that into what you need it to be. Okay, the best part about that whole thing is we do it each and every time we go out, because what it does for us is it builds a huge wealth of new bottom contour information for us. And we go back and we take a look at that. I might, you know, bring that information back on my SD card to my desktop where I'm residing with you all now, and upload that and take a really good hard look at it and kind of see, is there any spots, is there any changes? You know, when the Hurricane Sandy came in, for instance, in New Jersey, it changed a lot of complexities of the bars and the waterways and the sluiceways and the seabeds and sea lanes. So Sonar Chart Live, when you're running that, is really a valuable tool, and we use it each and every time out. For those of you that aren't familiar with Navionics, I just want to highlight a couple things. One of the important things with Navionics is their sonar charts. They feature a 1 foot change in depth on every contour line, which is huge because it allows you to see what the seabed is all about. Is it drop-offs? Does it have holes in it? Are there flats involved? All of this is where fish are going to stage and where you're going to be able to target these species in these staging points. So, you know, one of the things key for us, and we've been with Navionics for a long time, and we're proud to have them sponsor us and be a part of what we do. And a huge key and success for us is Navionics, and that's what we're going to be highlighting tonight. So for ever-changing conditions, there's only one electronic cartography software out there for us, and that's Navionics. Let me clear my little drawing here. And I'll close this out, and let's get back. Okay, so once again, just highlighting having the ability to record sonar not only provides tremendous fishing advantage, it also gives us the confidence to run at night. One of the things we love to do. When we're out there fishing for stripers, one of the key places we like to run is the rocks. It's actually Shrewsbury rocks, and we'll run out there, we'll sling eels all night and have an absolute blast of getting on those 30, 40, 50-pound fish, you know, that are not being beat up during the day by the fleet, you know, and when we do that, I will share a couple techniques with you when we're out on the rocks. Once I know I'm in safe water and I know where I am, I will turn off my sonar. I like going a little stealthy, especially when I'm going to target those really big fish. But I only do it for a very short time, and because I really like to know where I am. I do run handheld as well. I do have my VHF in my AIS, so I can actually make sure that my vector's clear, that I have no oncoming traffic, and I do know what's going on. So it's important to make sure that you just don't run completely dark out there, especially at night. You want to be safe and you want to be seen. Okay, if you take a look, and let me grab my little pointer here. If you take a look and you look at the, you know, the old charting style, okay, some of the charts you'll get very little detail. When you switch over to Navionics and the Sonar charts, especially the fish and chip charts, you're going to get much greater detail. And I'll tell you, when you're navigating at night and you're going into different ports of call that you're unfamiliar with, you know, that's a huge advantage having it right there, and it's very, very safe. And if you're looking into a new cartography, or, you know, a new plotter, new fish finder, you know, if you were with a Garmin and now you're going with Simrad or whatever it may be, I really recommend that you take a good hard look at Navionics and all the features that they have to offer. And just getting through some of this, so pardon my pause here. Okay, one of the things that you really want to get accustomed to is you want to be able to navigate, you know, fluently on the water, you know, through different chart modes and different menus and things like that. And the way to do it to shorten your learning curve is, of course, there's a lot of great stuff for plotters, manufacturers on YouTube. You can Google a lot of information. There's a lot of great guys out there doing great things, and gals for that matter, that really shorten your learning curve. So it behooves you to go on those sites, YouTube and Google and so on, and just pop in those questions that you're looking for. You'd be surprised in what would come up. But we like to use different chart modes, as you can see. You know, 3D satellite overlay imaging, you know, with Google Earth, for instance, is one of a huge one for us, because we get to see the topside picture. We want to kind of see what's going on, you know, with certain waterways and how it looks on the approach, you know, which is really helpful to us. And some of these screens, yeah, if you can see my mouse, you're going to see some areas where we're targeting a lot of different waypoints. And just let me get my my little pen back here. And if I show you, you'll see we have waypoints all along this route, okay? And what happened was we were out there fishing, and we kind of rolled up in here. We had a lot of bait in here. And then as the tide started to run back out, that bait was moving out. And each one of these marks where we were hitting bass all the way through. So we kind of found, it was strange, but there was actually a sea lane there. And after taking that picture back home and running the sonar, recording that sonar, we were able to say, hey, look at that cut. So it's kind of strange. That cut was not on the chart, but it was definitely on our amended chart, you know, when we got our sonar returns back through freshest data. So it was really interesting. So once again, recording sonar now, having sonar live is huge, because it's live. It's right there, so you can see those changes. That was a year or two ago, and we didn't have that feature, and we had to go back and we found that on the computer. So it was quite interesting. Okay, guys, I have to clear my little patterns. I see them still up there, but we're going to get into radar in a minute. I'm jumping the gun a little bit with this slide, but I have a purpose for this. So overlaying the radar is one of the features we're going to talk about, and it's one that I really implore you to do. All right, what it does is it allows you to mark the location of working birds and working bait. Now, you would think that that's kind of funny, you know, just by marking the birds. But when we're out on the radar, when we're out on the water and we're looking for radar, we're going to see different color flecks. Different flecks, different colors, blues and greens mean different things. Is it a concentrated, you know, pile of birds, which means those fish could be breaking if it's a really concentrated, you know, glom, for instance, we'll call it, you know, on the radar? Or is it a lot of little green flecks splattered all over the place, which means there's a lot of birds, but they're not concentrated yet. They're just kind of looking and working. And we'll get into that. The other questions that I would have for you, you know, or for me, or, you know, us on board when we're fishing is, are the bait schools found inside the bar or outside the bar? You know, are the bait fish holding tight to the bottom? Or are they higher in the water column? So we'll know that by looking at the sonar. You know, where are these bait pods staging? You know, are they just kind of drifting with the current? You know, are they staging in certain areas for protection, you know, in sea lanes or on drop-offs, or even behind high pieces for that matter? And lastly, where are the concentrations of this bait? Are they on the, you know, the warm side of the break, or are they on the cold side of the break? So these are questions that we ask ourselves when we're out there in order to start puzzling out a pattern. And bear with me 1 second. Okay, there we go. Just have to get used to this little pencil changes that they have now. Okay, so now we're going to talk about bait. We're going to get into the strategies that we use to, you know, for locating bait. So a number of things, and I'll run down the list on the screen that you have in front of you, is we run our radar, of course, because we're looking for birds. That's the first thing. You know, if we're not getting any bird return, we're going to go back to, you know, to looking for confusing water, or we're looking for slicks on the water, any kind of flat spots on the water. You know, sense of smell comes in. Sometimes you say, hey, I could smell the fish, I could smell the bunker. You know, was there an early morning bite where the bunker got chewed up by the bluefish, and all of a sudden, you know, we've got some oils and some slicks on the water, make it a little easier to view them. You know, the other thing is we're going to run our structure scan. We're running the Simrad NSS Evo 2, NSS 16 Evo 2. So we're running both our down scan and we're running our side imaging. And our side imaging on that Simrad unit is going to shoot 480 feet out on either side of the vessel. It's going to give us a really good picture, especially if we can't see any fitting bait or flipping bait. We're going to be able, maybe they're suspended 6-7 feet below the surface. That side imaging is going to help us locate that bait. The other thing is our SST images. We also have Sirius satellite marine weather on there, which is really huge for us, both inshore and offshore especially. But inshore, we use it to find temperature breaks. Even the slightest break, you know, might indicate where the bait is. You know, has there an ecosystem that developed, you know, within that break area, and all of a sudden, hey, you know, we're on the cool side of the break or we're on the warm side of the break, but at least we have an idea of where to start looking for bait. Okay. We're going to keep moving on here. Now I'm going to get into a little custom shading. These are some of the features that are on any plotter for that matter, whether it's, you know, Simrad, it's a Garmin, it's a Raymarine. They all have similar features. So the thing is we don't take the time to look at them, or a lot of folks don't. And the purpose of this webinar tonight is to try and highlight that. I won't dive into, you know, the specifics on how to do each one, but just give you an idea of what we do with our Simrad that you can emulate on your plotters, on your vessels. Okay, so what we use is a custom depth shading to highlight and target sea lanes, high pieces, drop-offs, and bait schools. And once again, let me get my little pen here. And if you take a look, okay, first of all, on my menu, I would just simply on the Simrad, if you have Simrad users, I would just highlight the actual sound, the actual plotter. And then I would come down, once I highlighted that, I could click my menu and it gives me all kinds of options. It gives me my shading options, my dynamic icons, my easy view, my overlays, my transparency, and my depth highlight. And I can change my depth highlight to anything basically by adjusting the, you know, the water depths and so on. So the green markers here, these guys here, those are my shaded bait marks. Okay, so I did this just for this purpose in the webinar to show you that certain shadings you can change, and you can shade certain areas that you have for bait later on. If you don't have shading, I would recommend you throw a waypoint. Choose a waypoint that reminds you of bait schools. And then this way, at least you'll know where the bait schools were, and you know, were they tight on the changes on the contour of the seafloor? Were they, you know, on a high piece? Were they in a bowl? You know, those kind of things. So you can definitely see some of the areas, you know, that we're changing. You can see the 13 to 16 foot depth here. The darker depths are going to be a little bit deeper. The lighter depths around it here. There's a nice little area here that looks very interesting that I would definitely target, where I'm surrounded by 10 to 12 feet of a body of water with a really nice high piece, probably anywhere to 4 to 6 feet right here. So would your fish be staging, anywhere along this high piece? And I would be able to drift or target those if I'm on the troll or if I'm, just drift fishing. So these are the things that, that custom depth shading will allow you to do. And it kind of just, hones in the areas that you want to target. Okay. Now we can kind of see what's going on in the plotter. I always like to do this. You can see, and I'm going to grab a little bit of little pen here, little pen information. Take a look at this. I guess we could call it a wall of bait, if you will. Amazing. 59 feet of water we found this bait in. However, it was suspended 10 feet below the surface. Now, to reiterate what I said earlier is we were running a regular traditional down sonar in chirp, high chirp, so we wanted to get some target definition. We wanted to see what it is. And after running over bunker many times with the old Simrad, I know this is nothing but bunker. Now, the funny and the interesting part about this particular screenshot, and I didn't realize it, the first time I looked at it, but you don't see any fish arches in there. Kind of unmolested bait school, if you will. There's really nothing that's on there, that's after that bait. There's no predatory fish that's looking at that bait. How we found that bait was definitely by using our side imaging. All right, so to confirm our depth of 10 feet here, you look here where we ran over that bait, and we have a 59-foot depth on our traditional sonar. However, we have a reading on our side imaging as we ran through that bait, and we have bait on both sides of the vessel, this being the center line. So either way, when we're getting ready to throw that cast net, we've got a wall of bait here. We can go port or starboard. Either way, we're going to be able to corral and make a nice throw with the net and come up with a high percentage of pieces. So if I move over here, you can actually see here's where our vessel is now, okay? But here's where we found the bait. And what we did here was a rodeo, and I have a couple of screens that'll show you that. So we basically cut into the bait here and here with our turn, and we kind of drew the circle around with the boat to corral them. And what this does is it kind of compacts them. They all seem to want to compact and come in the middle. And we're going to get a much higher percentage of pieces of bait in our net with this technique. And it works really, really well. Now, if I take you over here, you can actually see, these represents the direction of the current. Okay, up here you're going to get a tidal information. We were probably not even at the flip of the tide. We were at the top of the tide. There was no movement at all. And usually fish are tidal. You get a little movement in the tide. It spurs on a feeding activity or feeding frenzy. So therefore, that's how we got this picture, was there was actually no activity, and it reaffirms. So now I'm hoping you're paying attention with me, because there's a lot of stuff that's developing as an emerging pattern. We are going to go over it at the end of the seminar, but a lot of different things are happening, and I want you to know that you're getting this from Navionics. Okay, so right then and there, I actually know what what's going on with the bait. I decided to leave the dock at the top of the slack tide with little movement in search of bait. Where I didn't have to go with competing waves, and I didn't have to look where, in the middle of a bite, because I wasn't prepared. I wanted to make sure I got myself prepared on my trip, loaded up, and then I was ready for an afternoon trip. So anyway, let me clear this, and let's move on. And I'll close that out there. So just to just drive the point home, as you're seeing as we're going through this, most of the advanced angling technology that's available through these systems and through this electronic cartography with Navionics and others, there's so much available to you, so much available information that it gets overlooked. I use an analogy all the time. We spend a lot of time on our tackle, on our terminal tackle, our rigging techniques, our spinning outfits, our conventional outfits, and cleaning the boat. But do we really dedicate a sufficient amount of time to learning our electronics, to be proficient at them, and to understand all the things that they can do? One of the things I try to do is match the amount of time that I'm going to spend cleaning my vessel and preparing my vessel as with my electronics, whether it's on board or whether it's at home, you know, in the home office here, just fine tuning, you know, the way that I do things on board to make our charters very successful. So here's Captain John. As we saw earlier where I showed you the rodeo on the plotter, we're actually into the rodeo here. And, you know, this boat, once again, this bait school is located just inside the bar, close to the beach, probably in about 8 or 12 feet of water. And we found them on the flip of the tide. There was actually no movement. You can see how glassy it is out there. And this is out front in Jersey, running the coast, Jersey style. And the clear blue Atlantic is, you know, forward of the bow. So, you know, once again, side imaging, overlays, those are the things that help us find this bait. Now, if you look at the very top, I'll show you, let me just grab my little pen here. If you look at this little action here, this is actually denotes the circle of the rodeo that we made. And Captain John made a really nice throw, pretty nice flat pancake. I do remember this throw. So once again, you know, we employ the rodeo technique, you know, to get these bait to ball up and to you know, into land directly under the netting us a really high piece count. So we're not out there making several throws. It's a nice big throw in the morning or in the afternoon, and we're loaded up and we're ready to go. What we're netting, because we're talking about bait, but let's get a little specific. What we're netting is Manhattan, also known in Jersey here is our bunker. And bunker is definitely our friend, especially when we're targeting striped bass. And I want you to take a good look at this bunker. It's not really, you know, red fin, very clear. We're careful not to remove any of the slime when we're handling them. And, you know, these bunker are usually found anywhere in 50 to 68 degree water, you know, is ideal for their feeding activity, but also for predatory activity. You know, striped bass and the bluefish will jump all over these. The only time you'll find these things out there fitting and happily flipping is usually, you know, with very little movement on the tide, whether it's on the flip of the tide or mid-span of the tide. You know, if you're going to be looking for them during those points, side imaging is key, you know, to be able to find them. Sometimes, you know, they'll just be happy, you know, motoring through just below the surface, 2-3 feet below the surface. You can run right by them and never see them. So once again, your side imaging is comes into play. Early morning, there's Captain John. I usually run the boat a lot, and Captain John's over there on the net, and you know, we're jumping in. We're ready to go. We've got a charter. It's probably just before sunrise there, sun just peeking through the horizon. And you can see, you know, a nice throw on the net, a nice number of pieces. That was a particularly small school, so we had to do a quick corral with them and get them in the net, but more than enough to fill our live well. Now, one of the things I want to talk a little bit about is handling bunker, or any bait for that matter, is, you know, is handle it quickly, you know, and use diligence when you handle it with care. Try and keep the slime coats on it. Don't pack the live well. You know, they're going to get stressed in the live well. They're going to red fin. You know, they're not going to react, you know, as they would naturally in the wild, and that's going to diminish your presentation. Okay, guys, here we go. I want to talk just a little bit, and I know we're talking about electronics, but I am going to depart from time to time and just share some fishing strategies with you of what we're doing. Just to go over a few things, and I'm sure a lot of you know this already, but anyway, and I'll highlight them. Low tides, you know, are going to uncover your bars. They're going to uncover some of that shallow structure, some of that pier structure, you know, some of that jetty structure that you're not going to see on a full tide, exposing mussel beds and things of that nature, which is all great forage, you know, for the species we're targeting in bluefish and striped bass. High tides are going to flood those shoals and marshes. They're going to expose some more forage that wouldn't normally come out or that was protected. So on those full moons and those new moons, you're going to be able to expose more of that forage, and be able to, to flush out of there and bring predators in there. So those are areas that you want to target as well. Small flatboats, the yackers. I mean, it's phenomenal on the yak to get into those some back bay waters, and there are some really nice fish in there. The other thing is current and structure together form eddies. So whenever you get on those lucky spots, which are eddies, you're going to have a confusing bait pattern going on in there, and easy targets, for predatory fish. So definitely look for those, and you'd be surprised. You find a couple of good eddies, you'll be surprised of what jump point you can pull out of those and put over the rail. The other thing is trying on the Navionics with the 1 foot contour changes. You're going to target, any deep holes, of course, the edges. Any of those predators are going to stage right there for bait fish on the flips of the tide, whether it's an incoming or an outgoing. Forage baits are often found drifting or swimming with the current. So when we're looking for bait, we want to know the current direction is key for us. We want to know, if it's an outgoing tide, for instance, is it a northeast current direction flowing out northeast, or is it a south-southwest, depending on where you're fishing. And I'll show you a screen coming up, and Navionics will actually give you that information, which is really great right at your fingertips. The other thing is perfect for, setting trolling patterns, going with the current, of course, or even quartering the current is successful if you want to get a lift on some of those bigger spoons that they have out there. Always staying with the current is optimum. You're going to definitely increase your hookup ratio. Going against the current is unnatural, not to say that you're not going to catch here and there, but you certainly will have a higher hookup ratio when you're going with the current or quartering. One of the things, if you've got plugging guys on board and they're throwing poppers to these fish or swimmers to these fish, try and get your clients to cast up current, for a real natural presentation, reeling back in the same direction of the current flow, positioning the boat to allow them to do that is key. Forgive me for drinking a lot of water, guys, but I'm doing a lot of talking. Okay, so we talked about this, but we'll just re-emphasize it. Moving water often triggers feeding activity. Navionics is going to put you there. They're going to tell you where and when this is going to occur. They're going to give you the tide and current information. That's going to give you the direction of the flow and the speed of the moving current. So let me grab my little pen here. And if we take a look at the current stage of the tide, right, which is this bar here, we've got 123 degrees. We're about under 1 knot, so there's actually no movement because we're at the span of the tide there. It's 10:37 a.m. It's definitely, excuse me, it definitely looks like an incoming tide because you came off the bottom. So you've got an incoming tide there. An ebbing tide is going to give you the information. It's going to be the ebb tide is at 120 degrees, and the ebb tide is going to flow at 1 1/4 knots at a specified time, 9:18 in the morning. And the flooding tide is going to be, due north, 300 degrees, 1.3 knot speed, and that's at 3:41. So we know where we're going to be at the top of the tide, at the bottom of the tide. We know where we're going to be at the top of the tide, which is very helpful, information. I'm going to clear my drawings here, get to the next slide. Okay, this is a little animated slide, and this tidal detail keeps us in the bite through all stages of the tide. If you take a look at the direction of the current and the speed of the current, you'll see that changing from red to blue, and when it drops down, it's actually dropping down, and it'll give you the actual, where we are in the tide. We're at the bottom half of the tide. It's slowing down, 0.2. And now you've got, just reverse of the tide. So you've got an incoming tide and an outgoing tide. Up above, it's going to give you the range of the tide. We are in Manasquan Inlet, where we come out of in order to get out into the coastal water area. And but once again, having this tidal detail on board at your fingertips is key. You're going to know where you want to, certain areas of where you want to fish, whether it's in tight or it's on structure, if it's uncovered structure or if it's covered structure, and you want to plug those areas, or throw metals at those areas or shads at those areas, it's important to have that title detail with you. When prospecting for striped bass, all right, we've gone through a little bit now, just want to reiterate, we know it's extremely important for us to use our electronics and all features of our electronics, searching for those birds, looking for those bait pods, trying to find that structure, those perfect contours, those wrecks along the way. The satellite images will give us a good idea or an area that we're unfamiliar with before we get there. We'll have a pretty good landscape idea of how we want to approach this particular area and what we want to target. Do we see anything interesting that we want to explore? Okay, guys, that's Captain John. He's giving you just a little insight. The bunker are flipping. Once again, it's a quiet tide, probably at the top of the tide or mid-span at the tide. And we know on our plotter that we've got some really good marks, some good fish that are low. They're just not turned on yet. We're waiting for that moving water. So that's why I wanted to share that title information with you and how important it is to be able to have that at your fingertips on board, which Navionics does provide. Give you a little idea. Here's the vessel. Here she is. And that's how she's laid out. Now, we just grab my pencil on this one here. And I just want you guys to notice the boats, the schools here. Now, they're on a body of smaller fish, okay? And we're just sitting outside the school. And the reason being is those bigger striped bass are lazy, to be honest. They get that big for a reason. They're smart, and then they just kind of lay back. And they'll let the bluefish come in and rip the bait to pieces, and the falling chunks will come down, and it's an easy meal for them. They're opportunistic feeders, so they're going to lay outside. And we've known this after years of fishing, and these are the areas we target. So you can see we're a considerable distance away from the school. And I'll give you an idea. If you look at the plotter, right? Some people might say, what are you doing there, guys? There's no marks. There's nothing going on. Guys, I'm exactly where I want to be, okay? I want to be on the edge of the school. I may not be marking them yet, but believe me, I know they're there. So I just want to point out, sometimes if you have that blank screen, you may just be in the perfect spot. So it's just food for thought, something to think about. And let's get moving on here. I know we've got a lot to cover yet, but I'm enjoying speaking to you all and sharing what we do. Okay, so one of the big secrets, and it may not be a big secret, is the simple fact is bluefish set the table for the bass. We all get inundated with bluefish. They'll come in and rip rigs to pieces, tear bucktails with curler tails apart, bite tails off shads. But the bottom line is if there's big bluefish around, there's big bass around. So I'm pretty happy camper. Okay, we go into the next screen here. This Captain John with a really nice fish, touching 40. This was pulled right out of where I showed you, out of those bunker schools. That we're outside the edge of the school of a fish, but all the other boats were working those smaller fish, and our diligence paid off by landing a trophy fish like this one by working the outside of the school with a 0 marks on our plotter. But that fish was there. That fish came into the cone angle, and sure enough, our presentation was exactly what she was looking for. You can see she's a pretty healthy fish. She did actually go back in the water with a safe release. And we try to educate all of our clients on board, that the ones, that big females that, that have many years on her, deserve to go back in the water to sustain our fishery and keep the biomass at a productive level. Okay, so I'm gonna have a little sip of water, and then we're gonna dive into some sonar. Now we're getting into, we're going to talk about conventional sonar first. And the conventional sonar, and I'm going to grab my little pencil again. The conventional sonar is just like, it's just pinging. It doesn't give you a rapid pulse like the chirp sonar does. And the chirp sonar is going to give you a much greater return is what it comes down to. The other thing is your frequencies, your high frequency and your low frequency. So, you know, higher frequencies tend to give you a greater resolution at a minimal depth, and the lower frequencies are going to give you a lower resolution at a greater depth. So, you know, getting into that, we're going to dive into a little bit deeper, and I'll actually explain a little better or in more depth. Chirp basically, Chirp provides a pulse return offering much improved target separation. You're going to get a more defined image or arc, if you will. All right, with greater detail as compared with conventional pinging sonar. Let me clear this. And okay, so now I just wanted to give you a side-by-side comparison. You know, the Chirp sonar split with downscan imaging, and I run both, and you can see why. On your Chirp sonar, your target separation, okay, and that's at high chirp, we're at 38 to 40 feet of water. Your target separation is going to be pretty great here, and I'm hoping you guys can see this mouse on the screen. I'm sure you can. And then you can see a lot of fish, you know, on bait. Oh, let me go back one. You can see a lot of fish on bait here. You know, there's a little bit of a bait spool. They are getting attacked in here, so you can see them all bunched up. But then when you come over onto the downscan image, much greater detail. We can actually see what's going on here. We can actually see the structure. We can see the cuts in the structure, the drops in the structure. Much more clearer picture of what we're running over and what we're looking at. To give you an idea on this one here, the 455 kilohertz was selected for greater bottom structure detail at that shallower depth. So, you know, if your plotter has, depending on, you know, what ranges of frequency, you can adjust accordingly. For me, I like to run high chirp. High chirp starts in at 455 kilohertz. And when I'm fishing that 40 to 50 feet and below, that's the setting that I choose. Once again, just to reiterate, high chirp is going to provide you with a greater fish target separation. So one of the things that I definitely like running. Now, this screen's really interesting. There's a lot of information here. And what it comes down to is matching the beam angle, okay, to the specifics, you know, species that you guys are targeting, all right? It gives you the advantage to catch more fish. And if you take a look, up above on the plotter at 21.5 feet, you can see there's a lot of bait, but there is a lot of activity along the bottom. Let me just get my pen, and just in case the mouse isn't showing that. But you've got some nice marks right in here. You've got some nice marks right in here, and you've got one sitting up on this, staged up on this crown. So as this bait, if there's bluefish in this mix, and these falling chunks that we spoke of earlier are actually falling down, and these targets are larger bass waiting for this to occur, it's just a phenomenal, you know, feat, you know, to be able to see this happening. We know this to be true, but to just be reaffirmed with it on screen, you know, is quite exciting. I also want you to see, you know, shooting at high chirp, take a look at the bottom detail. Notice how crisp and clear that is. All right, that's one of the reasons I like to shoot in 455 in those lower depths, 40 feet and on down. Also, we can see the depth reading on our side imaging, you know, because we were looking for bait as we were looking for fish. So we're shooting out once again, you know, from the center line, 480 feet on one side, 480 feet on the other. And we've got a water temperature of 52 degrees. And we've got, on this one here, we're shooting at 800 kilohertz. All right. And the reason being is I'm not concerned on my side imaging on my bottom detail. I don't need that. I'm looking to shoot out wider. So when I shoot out wider, I'm going to lose a lot, you know, but I'm just looking for bait. So I'm not concerned about the bottom detail. That's why at the top portion of the screen is where I'm using my chirp sonar and my down scan. You know, that combination right up there gives me the greatest detail, so I can mark those fish that are holding tight to the bottom. You can see where we are in the position, just to give you an idea, right in between the two contour lines, if you will. which is kind of nice. It tells us that it's an edge or drop off. Those fish are kind of staging right in there. Nice sticky bottom, good place for them to hide as predatory fish. Now I just want to read, I put these here for you guys tonight in the webinar, and just want to run through this with you and let you know, what I do. All right. And I'm going to read this. I locate bunker schools using 50 kilohertz wide angle mode. Sometimes I like to use 800. On that particular screenshot, I did use 800, but mostly using the 50 kilohertz wide angle mode and then switch to 800 within my sonar menu to greater achieve that resolution of what was going on, trying to discern, how thick that bait was. All right. The other thing is the bottom detail. We talked about it's going to be crisper. Those larger stripers are going to typically hold to the bottom. I want to give you an idea of when to use this. The narrow beam angle when targeting structure and those species holding tight to the bottom. So that narrow beam angle would be your 455 kilohertz. The wide beam, okay, when I was looking for bait, is going to be that 800. I will start at 50, but I will go to 800. Sometimes I'll start at 800, but 800 is pretty much my predominant. Just to go back over it again, that's side imaging. All right, so that sonar is going to scan out to 480 feet on either side of the vessel if you're running a Simrad product. Okay, remember, the farther you shoot out, if you have other plotters that that can go up to 500-600 feet on either side of the vessel, all right, the signal carries, the longer the carry, the increased speed of ground that you're on, if you're up and running at a higher rate of speed, that sonar image is going to be, weaker, and those returns are going to become diminished. So if you're running, instead of you're looking at like 2 to 3 knots or, looking for fish, looking for bait, or you're up and running and you're running, 8, 10, 12 knots even, those returns are going to be diminished. So you may see the bait, but what you're not going to see is the structure or the predatory fish, the larger fish staging underneath that bait ball. So once again, I just tell you, what to expect and to be careful, when you're using side imaging. Okay. Let me clear that and close that, and on over to the next slide. Okay, so now we were working with our sonar and our traditional chirp sonar before in the previous slide, and we had side imaging below. Now what you can do is combine the two. You can overlay the down scan or your side imaging scan and put it into down scan mode for your traditional sonar picture with greater detail. Simrad structure scan provides us with this wide angle detail too, like I said, up to 480 feet. But this picture really does it justice. This captures it. I'm in medium chirp. I'm at 800 kilohertz in down scan, but look at the return, look at the image. I could really take a good hard look of what's going on. I'm going to actually grab my little pen here. And I know I'm running a little late and I do have some stuff to go over, so I hope you stick with me. But if you can see this, you can see these little rocks that are sitting up on top of here where the bait is kind of staged over them. And you've got a nice little jet out here, a nice little rock. You've got a nice mark here, a fish staging behind that rock. You've got some bait here. You've got a nice little detail here, bait staying in here. You've got some cuts in here. You've got life picked up in this as well. And, just a lot of information here on the bottom. So if you're going to anchor up and you're going to chunk these fish, or you're going to anchor on a wreck or whatever, and you have side imaging and you can change that feature over to down scan, you're going to get a much greater detail before you anchor. You're going to set waypoints in certain ways and make sure that your vessel swings in between this perfect structure to target those fish. One of my favorite features of all, being able to overlay my sonar, to overlay my side imaging right onto my cartography, right onto my chart, is going to allow me to map out my migration routes. It's going to be able to help me find productive sea lanes that typically hold fish, sea highways, if you will, that they cruise along during migration. It's just something that's phenomenal for, fish finding capabilities. It is the ultimate. It really is. And once again, Navionics provides that for us, and we're grateful for it. Okay, guys, that gives you a little overview. I'm just going to break it down. Okay, so now we're going to dive in and we're going to understand what we just saw on that recorded video. What John was telling you was the red gloms depicted on the radar are boats. The green and the blue flecks are concentrations of birds. All right, so once again, let me just grab my little pencil here and I'll just highlight this information for you. All right, so if you come in here, okay, this one here, that's a larger concentrations of birds. That might be, a bunch of birds working, looking for bait, looking for a fish to push that bait up and see what's going on. These smaller flecks, okay, this blue one here, that one's not one right there, but this one here I'm pretty concentrated on. Will give you an indication. Now, once again, taking a look at this radar picture, there's some information here. First of all, we do have activity. We have boats. Okay, these are boats returns. That's probably a head boat. I'm guessing that's a head boat. 6-pack, 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 6-pack. Okay, we've got another larger concentration of birds there. I would be concentrating on this one here. The reason being is it's a smaller concentration. It's possible that the fish have come up and are pushing the bait up to the surface, and the birds are compact and they're diving on that bait school. The other thing I would notice is 3 of these boats are converging in on those birds, which is going to tell me there's something going on. There's fish busting on the surface, something's happening. So when you're looking at your radar, I want you to think a little bit further, not just like, hey, there's a fleet out there, there's probably some fish being caught, but understand what's going on. We're going to get into the ARPA and the MARPA settings where you can actually target these 3 vessels to find out, are they running, are they stationary, what's their distance to the target, so on and so forth. We'll touch base on that just briefly, but to let you know. So to give you an idea of what we were looking at on that video, I hope that helps you. Let me just clear this here. Drawing, close this out. So once again, the big red gloms that are on your radar are boats. The red and the green blue flexes are going to be a concentration of birds. And this is a 4G radar in a dome, and with very little tuning on the gain. So pretty much a default setting, and we were able to detect this. Open array is going to give you a much greater detail, probably twice of what you can get with a dome, just so you know, in case you're interested in looking at different radar systems and what they offer. Okay, so we have a little visual. If we take a look at this and you look at the top of the left-hand corner of the screen, you're going to see, a black arrow with green birds. You're going to be able to see through the isinglass a little concentration of birds, and then you're going to see a vessel, and you're going to see another concentration of birds. That visual captures actually, and then you're looking on your screen and on your radar plot will confirm what you're seeing. Okay, so what we're seeing, with the birds is exactly what's happening in front of us. So this confirms that your radar is working, and now that you truly understand what type of birds they are, there was a mix of birds, so we were picking up everything, but you understand what's going on with your radar and how to read your radar better. Nothing better than an actual situation where you can put eyes on the birds or eyes on the water and confirm what you're seeing on your electronics. A couple of things going on that I want to highlight on this screen. Take a look at the bait. You can see the bait working, but take a look to the left-hand corner of the plotter of the sonar. We're in 17.7 feet of water, but look at those nice marks to the bottom left portion of the screen. That's a larger body of fish holding tight to the bottom. There's a lot of information here, but what's important is you recognize it, and you recognize that there's a pattern emerging. And we're going to wrap up the pattern shortly on a few more slides. So I'm not going to get into this. This is something that you can look into. I'm going to highlight it for you. Once again, Simrad has a new bird finder radar. I definitely ask you to take a look at it. As Simrad Pro Staff guys, it's one of the companies that we absolutely love, and all the guys at Simrad, right down to all the guys in tech support, all the folks there, we can't thank you enough for all your hard work and always being with us and helping us to be successful day in and day out on the water. With that said, understanding how to use your radar, key features for locating, a secret bite. There's a heck of a bite going on. We don't learn about it until the magazines get a hold of it a week later, or it trickles down in video reports, like through the Fisherman magazine here in New Jersey, or Angler Intel. But you can get ahead of that curve, okay? Simply by overlaying your AIS targets and your radar targets onto your plotter is one way. The EBL, the electronic bearing line, you can set up on your radar, all right, which is going to help you determine a vessel's heading, where are they running to, are they stationary, so on and so forth. Your VRM, which is your variable range marker, that feature is going to be able to confirm the distance to your target from the current position, which is tremendous and helpful. So you can identify a couple of targets on your radar screen, and then you can track them and follow them, and you can set all this up. Your ARPA and MARPA, for instance, automatically will allow you to track the course and the speed for a number of vessel targets. So, you can ID the targets that you're interested in and set that up. All right. By doing that, you're going to determine where that hot bite is going off. You're going to be able to get in on that action without anybody telling you. If you're looking for the acronyms on that, automatic radar plotting, aid is your ARPA, and your miniature automatic plotting aid is your MARPA. The other thing you can do on radar is getting comfortable and, turning or tuning up the sensitivity for your radar. This is going to increase, the chances of you finding those birds. If you find them on there, but the returns are weak, you can tune in for those, and you can make subtle adjustments, to make sure that you're seeing what you think you're seeing, and to understand whether it's a concentration of birds or it's just a large flock of birds, that are starting to assemble looking for bait. Okay. Lastly on this, I will tell you that open array antennas over dome antennas will typically double the range. So, have much greater returns at the same distance with very little tuning. Most of them are set to run now and auto-tune. Okay, there is a time now where there aren't birds, and that's when you've got to go old school. So, when the bite is slow and there's no bird play at all, we're going to select a few waypoints that were holding fish for us the previous trips out, all right? What we're going to do then is we're just going to simply start hopping from waypoint to waypoint. This is our prospecting method, of how we're going to look for bait schools that we knew were out there the day before or 2 days before. Try and find some of those marks that we're staging on certain pieces. They may or may not be there, but at least we have a point of reference, especially on those weather delayed days or weeks even where we can't get out on the water, especially lately with the hurricane. It's been a bust for us for September. Was really looking forward to getting on. We call it Mahi month, the month of September, and we kind of missed that. Hopefully they're still hanging for us. We can go out and target them. Okay, guys, that was just that was a phenomenal day. That was actually in the winter. We're talking November, to have that 68-degree day, and I do a lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff, especially behind the camera. But I just want you to take a look at the picture to the left of Dave there. He had a heck of a fish. That fish went 47, which was really a tremendous fish. We didn't dare pull her out of the water. We kept her right at boat side because he kind of put the heat on that fish, and we didn't want the I'm sure she started to build with lactic acid, so we didn't want to risk losing her. And I'm happy to report that we were able to return that 47-pound female right back into her natural habitat, hopefully to spawn many times over and increase that biomass. So it's kind of a proud moment. There's Captain John doing what he loves to do. As a Missouri Elite Pro staffer, Johnny gets in on some of that plug action, and that's one of his all-time favorites. So if we got any plugging guys out there that want to jump on board with us, Captain Johnny will surely show you how to work those plugs and maximize the design to do some amazing things. One of the things that gets overlooked a lot when we're out there fishing, and you probably do it on your plotters and things, is setting waypoints. There's no set number of waypoints. You can set a ton of waypoints. You don't have to worry about it. You can clear them off at the end of the day or the start of the next day. But setting a waypoint each time you catch a fish, you mark bait, it allows you to see where those fish are staging. It helps you to pattern out what's going on. So the more waypoints that I set, the way I look at it, the more clearly the patterns for me are going to emerge. And I know that I will delete them at the end of the next trip, so it's not a big issue. Let me grab my pen here real quick. I know this part takes me a little bit of time, but I just want you to see here, these are my waypoints, okay? And this here, all these little waypoints that I was putting on was interesting because they weren't in, any kind of a contour line or anything. What they were doing was they were following the bait that was being led by the direction of the current. And so it gave me a true reading of the current, based on a compass heading, which was really great. But it also let me know that these fish weren't holding on structure that particular day. They were holding on bait schools, and it's kind of set me up for the next week of fishing because I didn't go back to targeting structure. I just was looking for bait schools, and I was very successful. I was able to pull, numerous bass, quality fish out from underneath these bait schools and on topwater plugs, just outside the schools, which was a lot of fun when the bunker weren't harassed and they were just flipping. That's a time to throw a nice popper in there, and you'll get the same result. Just to give you an idea, at Manasquan Inlet, in case anyone's interested, the incoming tide, flows at 1.89 knots, and it's at a direction of 300 degrees. It's a northwest kind of flow. The outgoing ebb tide is 2.7 knots at its height at 120 degrees southeast. Let me close my little pen here. Okay. A lot of keystrokes on this thing, but anyway. Okay, so one of the things you can do, and I do this a lot, and it's set up individual waypoint categories. The categories work really well if you think about it. Recognizing fish patterns will become clearer for you when you take the time to mark these significant events that are developing throughout the day. All right, and you can categorize them. You can categorize them by color. For instance, you can do rock, your structure. The rock piles, okay, would be gray, bowls, ledges, wrecks. That would be a waypoint that's a color gray waypoint, for instance, or shading for if you're doing contour shading or something like that, and you just want to highlight those, you could shade those. The other one would be a bird category. You could do, sometimes we have letter categories. You could do S for structure. You could do B for birds. You can do B or PB for bait fish, a number of things. If you're doing birds, you could even identify specific species. You could identify them individually, the gannets, the gulls, your shearwaters, your storm petrel, your gulls, your cormorants. Same thing with bunker, bait fish. You can categorize by bunker. Is it peanut bunker? Is it squid? Was it sand eels that day? So you can select any kind of color, abbreviation, icon, any kind of notation you want, but just understand when you set this up that you have it in a category that you can decipher later on down the road. I would tell you to practice using various features on these electronic charts. The MOB is fine if you're in a fast, furious bite and you want to get some information about just the bite, how many number of catches and where. Whack that MOB constantly. Your pattern's going to develop and you're going to see, are they flowing with outgoing current on bait schools? Are they hitting a certain contour line with a perfect seabed with a lot of structure? All of that will be found just by tapping a waypoint, a MOB each time you hook up. And or the depth shading is going to work for you as well. Okay. Take a little sip of water here and change topics. strategies on how to troll structure and contours, basically like any pro. All right, what you're going to try and do is you're going to try and work along the sea lanes, the contour edges, and the drop-offs. Remember, Navionics, what do they offer? A 1 foot change in every contour line. So you know. All right, these contour lines are known to typically hold fish. Once again, you're going to troll those offerings in the same direction or quarter of the current, and those are all going to give you effective presentations. Depth shading technology. It's one of the greatest features out there. I don't think many people use it. I love it. It's something that makes me successful, you know, trip in and trip out. It's just one of the many features that Navionics offers that's going to boost your success. Let's dive into it. If you look at the center of the screen, for instance, let's say we're trolling spoons. All right, we're trolling spoons and we're on wire outfits. We've got 250 feet of wire out there, achieving basically, 10 foot, roughly 10 feet, excuse me, I think it's 50 feet or 100 feet, I forget, per 10. So 200 feet will give you a little over 20 feet, plus you'll have a little lift with the current, and you're probably trolling anywhere from, 2 knots to 3.5 knots. So you're going to achieve that depth range of between 20 and 25 feet. But what you want to look at on this particular screen is take a look at the contours, take a look at the shading areas. You're going to see a medium blue, a sky blue, a light blue, a grayish blue, a dark gray area, a charcoal area, a light gray area. If you notice, I set the shading for this particular run for that, that 25 foot to 29 foot range, which is going to be my safe trolling area. So I can troll within these areas, and I can grab my pen here, and I can show you safely. I control, anywhere I want in these areas because I know I'm in safe water. I know I'm going to be fine. I can work closely to the edge if I want. These contour lines, maybe these fish will come off these edges to pick me up, and I'm in safe water, which is really great. So once again, the depth shading comes into play, where you're not snagging or you're not hanging your spoons on structure because you're not familiar, or you step out of the zone of where you want to troll. Depth shading is an important feature, for keeping you in the zone of the body of water that you want to troll in, without major adjustments. Constantly reeling up. If you're using downriggers, constantly raising or lowering the downrigger. Just by, if you leave the helm, for instance, and you know where you want to fish, but you've got to check the lines, or if you've got to do something on board and your buddy steps up at the helm, all you have to do is say, hey, stay in the shaded gray areas, the charcoal areas. Don't run into any of the light blue areas or the medium blue areas. So it's a very important feature. And let me clear this. Okay. All right, guys. Autopilot. Not all of us have autopilot. Those who do are very fortunate. Autopilot is not just running for long distances. I use my autopilot throughout the day, especially if I'm on the troll. You can pick patterns. We run the AP24 in conjunction with the NSS60 Evo 2, and it's a dynamite system. It's right on the money. And it's not off to the port or to the starboard. It is dead on accurate. And one of the reasons we really love it. But you can do preset patterns. If you've got an area where, you're seeing bait schools and stuff, but you want to cover a little bit of water, if you wanted to use, if you've got bait schools in a square, for instance, you could certainly, choose the square where you're actually working the square. You can go in and you can do a zigzag pattern through a number of productive contour lines that you may have had on previous trips. You can do a half arc, you can do a circle, which, may do that. If you get on a troll and you're whacking fish on both sides of the current, which is, unusual sometimes, but if they're on the chew, they're gonna go. You can run a figure 8, so you can just keep working that same section of body of water. You can do confusing pattern. You can do circles all the way through. You can also pre-program from waypoint to waypoint. So on the previous patterns that I showed you, during the webinar, I can plug in a series of waypoints, and I could just sit back at the autopilot, take me right up those contour lines that I want to target, that I know are productive based on my previous passes. Now I can concentrate on my lines. I can concentrate on my presentation. I can tweak my depths if I'm fishing with wire or braid, or if I'm fishing with downriggers. I can really pinpoint that structure. I can swim those spoons 2, 3, 4, 8 feet off the bottom because my autopilot feature allows me to do that. Especially if you're a one-man crew or even a two-man crew, you're just fishing much more effectively if you have an autopilot and you understand how to program it and how to use it to your advantage to catch more fish. There I am, a little Navionics outfit there. Basically, the downrigger fishing, which we were just talking about, it's one of the techniques that I absolutely love. Controlled depth fishing is definitely where it's at. I won't deny there's a learning curve involved with it, but I've been doing it for a number of years, and I can tell you I can pull just about anything on a downrigger really effectively by trial and error. You can use anything. You can use any kind of spinning outfit, conventional, fly rod, as silly as that sounds. We've done it. Your possibilities are endless. So if you're looking to investigate in some downriggers, and that's a time for another seminar, I'd certainly be happy to share what I've learned over the many years and shorten your learning curve. Or you can always reach out to me through Long Run Fishing Charters. We're getting towards the nitty-gritty, and it comes down simply to understanding your overlay advantages. By using the electronic overlaying features, once again, overlaying your radar over your chart plotter, your AIS marks, which are triangle marks that are going to lay on your plotter. All you have to do is take your cursor, highlight them, hit them, and it'll actually tell you, is it the Misty Morn, for instance? Is it the Miss Michelle? It'll tell you all the different vessel information. And if you know they've been on a good bite all week, maybe that's where you want to run. Your down scan imaging, your side imaging also can be overlaid on your electronic cartography plot. We now can quickly add waypoints with all of this information to puzzle out the productive contour lines, the bottom structure, along with choosing the correct depth to set out our spoons, dialing correct controlling speeds, set up our autopilot for precise trolling patterns, all of what we just talked about. And, the trolling patterns along with the direction, just to be productive. All of these features in our electronics of what we are using has a huge advantage to getting us on those bites, those secret bites, those well-known bites, and making us more productive than perhaps others that are out there in the fleet. I just want to go over this little screen here. Bear with me. I know we're running way over. I hope some of you are still with me. But I'm enjoying speaking with you and doing the webinar. Let me grab my little pencil here. And if we take a look at this, this is, we're actually out on the, I think it's the southeast corner of the Axel Carson Reef. We were out there, we're near the 3 nautical mile line. So obviously we're over the fence, so we're fluking. But if you take a look at the pattern here, you can see a lot of my waypoints. Now, these are all MOBs because I didn't have time. We were on a pretty hot bite. We had some really good AIS information, up there. The Gambler was up there. Those guys, everybody was doing really, really well. But, we found a certain body of fish that I was patterning out. When I got back to the dock and I went back and I took a look at my recorded sonar because I wasn't running the Sonar live on that particular day. I found that there was tremendous sticky bottom. There was tremendous bowls and sticky bottom, and went right back there the previous days out and did very, very well. Ended the season with a 10.2 pound fluke. So the diligence with the MOB button and all my features, running through with Navionics and with the Simrad system really paid off. There I am with a nice striper. We're working back. We were working back. Catching some fish inshore, which was really, really nice. So you never know what you're going to get out there. That's the best part about it. Close that and continue onward. Once again, just to emphasize, customizing your settings, on your electronics is key. It's really key to dialing in the bite using all of your electronics, as we've been highlighting, through this evening. Some of the quick things you can do on your for sonar is your speed, your scroll speed, your TVD, your scroll speed, your time varied gain. Those adjustments all will help you, canceling out with the gain with some seed clutter to get a better, clearer picture. Adjusting the scroll speed, in deeper water, that pulse rate, as you know, is going to slow. We went over that. Speeding up the pulse rate, it also will enlarge the targets on your screen, so that'll help you. So if you're finding you're reading small targets, you can adjust your scroll speed, and that'll certainly help you understand the type of targets and what you're seeing on your sonar. Forgive me. Guys, I do run the Canon Mag 10s, Mag 20s, Mag 5s. Control depth fishing, like I mentioned earlier, is just one of the most effective, versatile techniques any angler can really have in their arsenal. To quick highlight a couple of things: stationary down rigging. You can basically send baits right down into the strike zone. You can flatline. You can chum with perfect accuracy if you're offshore for sharking. You can chum the water column. They're programmable. You can step them up from the deepest depths, right up, so that you're bringing those fish right up to you. A variety of artificial baits can be used: spoons, plugs, U-rigs. Once again, targeting those fish with pinpoint accuracy. The electric downriggers come into play for me for cycling actions. I can cycle these baits, which will give them more fleeing action. I can cycle my chum. It just offers, a killer bait presentation. Once again, downriggers, I can't tell you, especially during, when we were fishing many, many tournaments through the years, they've really helped us put us on top, especially on those artificial tournaments like the FLW. When the FLW did the Striper Series, it was a phenomenal, thing to have in our arsenal that really set us apart from some of the other competitors. Once again, we would always target them, whether it's stationary or whether it's on the troll. We have just tremendous success targeting striped bass that are holding tight to the bottom. Probably one of the single most important things I could tell you in this webinar is spend time with your electronics. Learning how to quickly navigate the function keys on your electronics will make you much more productive on the water. As you're seeing tonight in the webinar, there are many manufacturers that offer webinars and all kinds of information, online. So I would ask you to check those out to shorten your learning curve. Just getting in, just to reiterate a couple of things, birds hanging over large bait concentrations. One of the things we like to do is we'll wait it out. We're patient. You got to be patient when you fish. When you're patient, good things happen. So we'll wait it out, and most times we're always rewarded for that patience. Once the tide starts to move, as we learned with currents, usually it's game on. Those fish begin busting all over the surface and all around us. You can see on the screen, we've got a good bait concentration and some really tremendous marks. You can see with the arrows the pattern developing, so I want to highlight that for you, where the concentrations were, where the good structure was, where the bait seemed to be holding, and we kind of put it all together with the electronics, and the result is this next screen. Guys, that was a phenomenal day. It really was. And our patience really, really paid off. It was one of those days that was difficult. We marked a lot of fish. We had no takers. And then once, as you can see, the tide's really starting to roll here. And we stayed diligent. We knew those fish were going to come up. We knew there were tremendous marks, as you saw on the screen. And sure enough, we were rewarded. There's Johnny hooked up in the melee there. A couple nice fish, which was really good. We had switched over to the fish ID, which is another feature on most plotters, most sounders. And we just wanted to pick out the bigger marks. So, we don't always use fish ID, but when we're targeting those bigger fish, we were going out for trophy bass that particular day with 2 clients on board, and they weren't interested in catching smaller fish. They were looking for a trophy. And so we kind of concentrated our efforts towards that and dialed our electronics in to give us a shot. One of the things I want to share with you, we're fishing with, with weighted tsunami shads. And what we found, especially in those sandy areas, was letting them sink and actually lay on the bottom. A couple turns of the handle and boom, we were on. So it was a pretty interesting technique. And it happened by fault. I happened to cast one out there, and a client needed my assistance, so I stuck it in good old rod holder. And when I picked it up and turned the handle a couple of cranks, boom, I was on. And that was the technique that put some nice fish over the rails that day. So you never know. So once again, you can see our excitement. We're like two young kids out there, when we're out fishing and hooking up, and nothing gives us greater pleasure than being able to bring what we know and share it with our clients on board and make them successful on a trip. That gives us great pleasure and great joy. So we're actually getting down to pretty much the end of it. I wanted to let you know that once you're dialed into productive pattern, I want you to focus your efforts, what we call the pattern zone. You've got all the information, you've done all your homework out there on board during the slope periods. Those bite windows are shallow, sometimes 15, 20 minutes, and that's it for the day, so you've got to be able to be ready to understand your electronics, to capitalize on emerging patterns and understand what's developing and where that bite's going to develop. And there you're going to be able to catch more trophy fish. I want you to take a look with that arrow. I want you to notice all the boats making a run for the birds. Once again, we talked earlier in the webinar that those bigger fish are going to lay outside the school. And it's never more evident or prevalent in this photograph, where everybody is making a run on those concentrations of birds, where there's bluefish and small striped bass working that school. We stayed diligent. We're staying outside the school, and it paid off with a nice fish in the net. Once that melee dropped off, those bass are still lingering. They're going to work the outside of the school. There's Captain John with a nice fish and a result. And that's actually a weighted popper. So that's loaded with shot. And so he was actually just flipping it boat side. And we were looking for fish at the time, because that's a conventional reel. And it was just below the surface, and he'd give it a couple pops now and then, so it would kind of dive down and come back up, and that was the result of that action. So Johnny's pretty innovative when it comes to throwing those plugs. I want to go over finally the developing pattern for the day of what we look at and what we note, throughout the day, trying to discern what that emerging pattern is. On this particular day, this is what we write at the end of the day. These are my notes. We had lots of bird play. We had high pressure with lots of sun, as you noticed in the photograph. The sea conditions were moderate at 2 to 3 feet. The winds were out of the southwest at 5 to 10 knots. The water temps were pretty cool that fall day, 56 to 58 degrees. There were tons of bunker, acres of them. Most of those bunker schools we noted were not holding, any fish. There were no fish underneath them. There were no fish through them. It was one of those tough days. VHF, that's also an indicator. No transmissions, kind of slow. No fish were taken on the troll from what we were hearing. So, you can kind of see that pattern starting to come together, obviously there's not a troll bite, so we got to stay diligent. We got to stay patient. Bass were holding tight to the bottom, as we noted on some schools. So we knew we were going to target those and be specific in that nature. Bass and blues started to chew on the turn of the incoming tides. That was a pattern. So the next day out, we'd be looking at the incoming tide. Smaller bass were caught mostly on the surface to mid depths. Swimming plugs and poppers were the preferred offering. Bigger bass were on those white weighted tsunami shads, which were just laying on the bottom, couple handle turns coming off the bottom, and we were on. We concentrated solely our efforts that day on targeting trophy bass that were staging on some of those bunker schools where they were just kind of laying back. They weren't really attacking the school. They were sitting back. So whether they were on the chew a day or two ago and they were ready to eat again, as long as we presented a very simple, easy meal to a a lazy trophy striper, we were hooking up. Okay, so to finish up what John was talking about was basically like we talked about earlier, we saw those boats running for the birds. We never run up hard when we're approaching a school of, of breaking fish or working birds. We don't want to interrupt that feeding cycle. We want to join that feeding cycle, and we have to kind of be patient and look at that feeding cycle, understand where those fish are moving, how they're feeding, and we kind of want to rhythmically jump in with that feeding activity, and that's the best way to approach a school, instead of just running up and running through it and putting those fish down. Some of the offerings when we're throwing our plastics, a variety of different lures, anything from your split tail, your hoagies, your tsunami shads, your weighted shads, your storm shads. We're open. We throw a bunch of different things. You've got some Ava jigs in there as well, and some sand eel type. The paddle tails, in the bunker around those, those adult bunker, even the juvenile bunker are a tremendous offering. Okay, guys, one of the things that we always do when we're out looking for fish, or if we're even approaching a school of fish, or breaking fish or birds working, you'll always see us drop a line or two back as we're slowly approaching that school, because we're not running and gunning on that school. We're just going to slowly meander and approach that school. I can't tell you how many times we've hooked up on the approach to that particular school. Or trolling or casting into that school. It's just a great way, a little technique to understand what's going on with the water, start patterning out what's going on with the MOB button real quick when we hook up, and to see, are we in the school? Are we outside of the school? Are we approaching the school? All of that is pattern information that's going to be useful for us throughout the day. Guys, I remember that day. There were boats running and gunning all over, and we really stayed true to ourselves and being diligent and patient. And I can't tell you the amount of fish we put over the rails that day. And it's very rarely that I get to fish, so I was kind of shocked when I saw that slide. I forgot I had that in there. So once again, just because the birds moved off, it doesn't mean the fish have stayed dialed into the bite with your sonar, and you'll be rewarded. You just take a look at the screen. You'll notice that we did throw the fish ID up on the chart plotter side to the left of the screen. The reason being is we had clients on board who were casting, and we were calling out the depths to them. So if you look at the screen, if I kind of lean in, the magic area was anywhere from 14, 14, 16, 18 feet was the ideal target area. So we were letting some of those swimmers that they were throwing to get down a little bit so that they would hook up. All right, so Johnny, as he's always fond of telling everybody, he's the king of small fish. But anyway, I just wanted to emphasize, try and match the hatch whenever possible. Understand what the bait migrations are, what the forage is for these predator fish, and try to match that as best as possible. That'll certainly increase your hookup ratios. Okay, guys, and that's pretty much sums it up. John gave you a quick overview of what we're doing in the fall down the Jersey Shore. And, we're looking back at, our ebooks, our logbooks, for instance, for all of these patterns, all this data that we've accumulated over the many years really helps us to understand the migration routes or the repeats in certain years with certain conditions, certain barometric pressure, or highs or low pressure systems, that come into play, overcast days, bright bluebird days, everything from sun angles, morning angles where there's less penetration in the water column as opposed to noon where it's a 90-degree penetration in the water column exposing much more. There's not much darkness for the predatory fish. The bait fish can be seen. They can see the predatory fish coming, and they can flee much sooner. So all of that does come into play. And this is just about it for the webinar. I really enjoyed spending time with you guys, and I hope I didn't keep you too long, but I had a ball doing it. Navionics, I can't thank them enough, and I'm very grateful, John and I, both for being part of them and being on their pro staff and providing them with insight and information, and ultimately for them making us very successful on the water, for not only us, but for our clients as well. So just want to leave you with this. Navionics will allow you to pre-plan any of your success, prior to you heading out on the water. There's so much to look at. The plotter sync is a tremendous feature. I would ask you to definitely take a look at that. You can do a lot of your homework at home and then transfer it right onto your plotter on board and go out and have a real successful day. So I'll hang around for a little while, see if you guys have any questions and answers. I'll end it with a little enticing video of a day on the water with Captain John and Captain Dave over at Long Run Fishing Charters. Thank you. Okay, guys, I don't know about you, but that definitely got me juiced to get back out on the water. So I think I know where I'll be tomorrow morning. All right, I have a couple of questions, I think, coming up here. So let me dive in. And okay. All right, very good. I'll hang for a little bit. And if I miss you with the Q&A, or if you don't have any questions, that's great too. You can certainly find us at longrunfishingcharters.com. Reach out to us via email or give us a call. The number is always available, and we're always happy to reach out and speak with everyone and share our knowledge and insight with you. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I look forward to doing this again and seeing you all soon. Take care now.